There was a time when we were much more powerful. But that was long ago. You must have no end of questions, Guardian.
What happened to it?
I could tell you of the great battle centuries ago, how the Traveler was crippled. I could tell you of the power of the darkness, its ancient enemy.
Sure, yeah, I think that'd be fine.
The darkness is coming back. We will not survive it this time.
Oh man, not this again. Hey all, this is Siege, and now that the Age of Triumph has passed, the updated raids have been introduced, and Destiny 1 essentially has come to an end, I want to talk about something that may very well affect Destiny 2, and may end up reintroducing one of the major weaknesses of Destiny into this new offering. If you enjoy the video, please consider liking and sharing it, and if you want, subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for any support you give, as it helps so much. Alright, so many of you who watch this channel already know that I'm a sucker for a great story, and know that if you dig deep enough into it, Destiny actually has one of those. What you might not know is that a writer's strike is being threatened to happen on May 1st, and should it occur, many TV shows, movies, and unfortunately video games could be affected by it. Because the writers for all these types of media belong, at least in part, to the Writers Guild, their major union, it's entirely possible and looking more and more probable by the day that when the strike happens, these writers will ultimately put down their pens in a show of solidarity and will effectively stop creating material until their demands are met or a compromise with Hollywood is reached. To provide some context of what could transpire, a similar strike occurred in November of 2007, one that lasted 100 days and affected countless shows and movies. Some seasons of shows were cut short. Some shows were canceled or repurposed due to a lack of content. Some very promising shows ultimately failed due to the reduction in story quality, where lesser writers not affiliated with the union were utilized. Quite a few movies at the time produced very lackluster stories, such as Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, G.I. Joe: Rise of Cobra, and X-Men Origins Wolverine, which, let's be honest, was impressively bad, due to this strike. It could even be said that reality TV became a mainstay in our culture because of the strike. It was a really dark time for entertainment. What's that have to do with Destiny 2, you might be asking? Well, one could assume that most, if not all of the story is already written, which is obviously a good thing. However, we still have almost 5 months before release, so if there are any unfinished aspects of the plot, there's a pretty good chance that part will be finished by another set of writers, those that have either crossed picket lines or just don't belong to the guild. The potential quality of the story could also be assumed to suffer in the process, not just because of the lesser writer, but also due to a disconnect in the vision of where the plot was and where it will be headed to in the future. For those of you who feel this is impossible, I offer you Destiny 1 as a prime example of what can go wrong. Shortly before its launch in 2014, Destiny completely retold their writing staff and story, unhappy with the one that was created by writers like Joseph Staten and Josh Rubin. I don't think I need to go too deep into the shortcomings of the Destiny story, as most of you already completely understand how bare and pointless most of the in-game story appears to be. In fact, at times it doesn't even feel like a disjointed story, more so like they just decided to remove most of it from the in-game experience altogether.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
The addition of the grimoire that had to be viewed outside of the game is fairly solid evidence of that. This is what can happen when a story takes a drastic turn or is scrapped shortly before the game hits shelves. As far as we've been told so far, Destiny 2 will be heavily focused on the story, something I really appreciated from Bungie, where it seemed like they listened to their fans and wanted to make things right from the train wreck they ended up churning out, at least in the story's regard in Destiny 1. To me, this makes things all the more disheartening, as this time it might be out of their control. But Siege, like you said, the story's already done, right? I mean, the gameplay reveal trailer appears in May, so the game has to be pretty much finished, don't you think? Well, my friends, maybe. But even if it is, there could still exist a significant issue. one of the main reasons we are even experiencing a Destiny 2 over, say, a 10-year Destiny game is that the Destiny engine made it very difficult to produce new content. I'll link to an article in the comments below regarding how the old engine was seriously hindering new content development, but long story short, it just took considerable time and resources to create anything new. This might be one reason why Age of Triumph was just updated activities. Apparently the juice just wasn't worth the squeeze, if you will, and it was decided to pour most of the team's assets into Destiny 2 instead of devoting any real time to a final free DLC. However, this is what really worries me. Bungie has stated that this new engine will allow them to dribble content out similar to how World of Warcraft does, and unless the story is written out months or even years in advance, we could have a bit of a problem. You see, the strike is based largely on the influx of stream media and the decision of who and how people should be paid in the process. I'm not going to go too deep into the strike itself, but just understand that it's not as simple as it was in the past where a writer would be contracted for material, produce a number of shows, and then get paid for it. Anyone that does any work with internet media can tell you, it's basically like the Wild West out here. There's not a lot of solid rules, or even agreed upon ideas. So you can probably guess when millions or even billions of dollars are on the line that everyone's going to want their piece of the pie, and deciding that is going to come down to every conceivable loophole, judgment, and even appeal. Because of this, a strike could last a very long time, and that doesn't bode well for future content, both in Destiny and really any media where its writers or directors are members of the guild. Unfortunately, if they are, they will most likely be lost for the entirety of the strike, which would make that nightmare Destiny 1 scenario where the story is either a mess or just not there more and more of a reality. As I mentioned before, the 2007 strike lasted 100 days and was based primarily on getting more money from larger studios. This time, things aren't nearly as black and white, with writers wanting elevated salaries to compensate for the loss of work stream content is partially responsible for, which could stretch things out much longer than before. And if it does, we might see a huge variance between Destiny 2 and its future DLC offerings. Think of the difference between The Taken King and Rise of Iron. Whereas most thought Bungie was really headed down the right path with The Taken King in mission variation, character development, and overall storytelling, in my opinion, Rise of Iron was a giant step backward in every one of those areas. Now, before you say it, I know, it was put together in a relatively short period of time, but I don't feel like that's an acceptable excuse. After all, given how badly they were taken to task concerning the exact thing at its original launch, and how they remedied it in The Taken King, one would assume they would at least have a checklist of what successful Destiny content required. Feels like they forgot to check those boxes off for Rise of Iron. I don't know. Of course, now that we know how hard it is to generate content for the vanilla game, maybe they deserve more of a pass. Hey, I'm a decent guy. I can do that. But I won't lie, everyone. I am worried. Perhaps it will all work itself out in the end. Or perhaps the strike won't even occur. Maybe last for just a really short time. I hope so. I've invested so many hours into this franchise, and I feel like I need to have something back for my troubles. If Destiny's story is either disjointed or non-existent, I will be way more disappointed than I am over losing gear or even abilities. Even if the new stuff doesn't resemble the old at all, Bungie knows what they're doing in that regard. I don't think anyone can argue that Destiny's gameplay it's near perfect. The game itself is fluid and responsive. The abilities are fun and innovative. The weapons are vast and different. The visuals, including area settings and skyboxes, are unmatched, and the music is so good that the soundtrack is totally worth actually purchasing. It's so close to having all the pieces for a perfect game, and if they accentuate the positives and just listen to the community, Destiny 2 could be that game. It just makes me sad that after 3 years with real communication between the devs and the fans and a blueprint for the game that I think everyone's been waiting for, that it could be ruined just because of bad timing. Time will tell, I suppose. I have been unable at this point to find a specific article detailing what the 2017 strike could do to gaming as a whole. But given that since 2009, the Writers Guild has instituted a video game writing award, with notable past winners being Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, The Last of Us, Uncharted 2, and Rise of the Tomb Raider, I feel like assuming that the writers of Destiny 2 belong to the Guild is a pretty certain thing. The story of Destiny 2, especially with the disaster of the first one, will not be handed over to writers without a significant pedigree. That much is sure. And because of this, it's more likely that a strike will affect the upcoming installment, at least in some way. My only hope is that it all gets resolved quickly. I swear to all that is good in this world and that one, if the speaker considers if he can or can't tell me something in the opening scenes of Destiny 2, I personally will become the darkness, and I will kill him right then and there. How's that for making my own story? That's where I'm at, everyone. Come at me. And let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be curious to hear. At any rate, take care and fear not. The strike has until May 1st to work itself out. Let's just hope for the best. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.